Hey guys, it's McGinn here. I wanted to create a video using the what, how, why chart and Julius Caesar because a couple of you guys asked about that, and I think that this will probably be helpful. The first thing that I wanted to show you guys is that there's this website. It's called Open Source Shakespeare. Did I spell source wrong? Oh, it's spaced. When you go there, it's this one, opensourceshakespeare.org. When you go there, you can search by play. So we're reading Julius Caesar, and it will have all the acts and scenes. The reason that this is helpful is that, let's say you're talking about, and I guess I'll talk about when Cassius talks to Brutus and tries to convince him that Caesar is ambitious and dangerous to Rome. It's all right here. Okay. Now, the cool thing about this is not that it's digital. I mean, that's cool. But the really cool thing is that if you hold control and you press F, you'll notice that this little find in page thing comes up. And in fact, if you type something that you know is said by Cassius, you can find it right away. So, like, say you know he says crown, or we know Brutus says crown. Lots of people say crown, right? But we can hit enter and cycle through them. Brutus says, what was the crown offered to him? Cassius says, who offered him the crown, right? But I know for a fact that I also could type fever because Cassius says that Caesar had a fever in Spain. Oh, look at that. Uh, he had a fever in Spain, and when the fit was on him, I did mark how he did shake. 'Tis true, this god did shake. His coward lips did from their color fly, right? I could use that evidence. That's pretty obvious, right? Like, Caesar should not be king of Rome because he's weak. He had a siege. He had a fever and cried like a girl, right? He also had a seizure, which is another issue with him, is that he's sickly. Um, when we use really obvious evidence, you are probably not going to score as well. Like, you're pushing more like 3 rather than a 4. So if I'm on the fence, I'm probably going to lean 3. Now, there's probably like some more subtle evidence here that we might be able to target. I would not Cassius yet. I love him well. Wherefore do you hold me here so long? Achieving Brutus says I do know your outward favor. All right, here. So we could pick up this evidence. Let's talk about that one with our what, how, why chart. So I'll pull that up. So what is literally just what's being said in the text, right? So Cassius is basically trying to convince Brutus to kill Caesar. We could say in the play, Cassius states. This is going to come out all weird because it was copied over. But it's actually kind of helpful because when you cite Shakespeare, and if you're doing it accurately, you have these little slashes in between lines. And we know where the line ends because it is capitalized. So we could just bump that over, slash space. And then we'll take out the 185 because that's the line number. But it's also helpful because you know that now. We'll put another slash in there. All right, now if we were gonna cite this information, we would end quote here. We'd put in parentheses, act 2, scene 2, line 185. But it's probably 183 to, I think, like 187 were those lines. There's like 4 of them. And then we put a period on the outside like that. That's our what. That's like the quote, what's happening, right? So now we need to ask ourselves, like, how does this work? Or, like, what is Cassius doing to Brutus here? He says, I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for my single self, I had as lief not lived to be in awe of such a thing as myself. So he's saying that he is not vain, he is not into himself, he is only caring about his professional nature, being a strong Roman, and so on and so forth, right? Essentially, he knows that Brutus is also this way, so he's trying to apply this sort of feeling to his knowledge of Brutus, right? He's trying to get him on board with him. So we could say this demonstrates that Cassius is trying to improve his ethos with Brutus by claiming to be uninterested in personal gains. And he later broaches the topic of honor and not self-interest with Brutus. Okay. So that's like a one sentence how. I mean, that's really how Cassius is coming across here to Brutus, right? Let's go 12, 14 there. And it's less obvious evidence to use. I think it's still good evidence, though, because this is Cassius establishing himself to Brutus, right? Why does this matter? Well, I'm not going to start with well. This is important, notable. This matters. This matters to Cassius's argument because if he is self-absorbed, then that's probably hyphenated. Let's see. If he is self-absorbed, then Brutus is not going to want to support him in his rise against Caesar. This also reflects Brutus's own lack of self-interest when deciding whether or not to kill his friend Caesar. Much like when Cassius claims to entreats Brutus to allow him to be his mirror. We could even say a little bit more here. Actually, we could say even though Cassius is obviously trying to he's not just trying to persuade Brutus, he's really trying to be a snake. Is obviously trying to manipulate. This shows his deep understanding of people and how they work. Because he's a manipulator, right? So the cool thing here is that when we do this chart, I can take this and I can go over here, drop down, paste it. I can take this here, copy, paste, and then I can take this here, copy, paste. Right? Now, for a piece of evidence, this has essentially one evidence point. It has one sentence here discussing how that works. It has 2 or 3 sentences here discussing why that matters, right? And the how can be really long, but it isn't always, all right? So when we read this out using our what, how, why chart, in the play, Cassius states, "I cannot tell what you and other men think of this life, but for myself, my single self, I had as lief not live to be in awe of such a thing as I myself." Okay, the how. This demonstrates that Cassius is trying to improve his ethos with Brutus by claiming to be uninterested in personal gains. And he later broaches the topic of honor and not self-interest with Brutus. He says, honor is the topic of this discussion or something like that. This matters to Cassius's argument because if he is self-absorbed, then Brutus is not going to want to support him in his rise against Caesar. This also reflects Brutus's own lack of self-interest when deciding whether or not to kill his friend Caesar, much like when Cassius entreats Brutus to allow him to be his mirror. Even though Cassius is obviously trying to manipulate Brutus, this shows his deep understanding of people and how they work, so that he can control them. Now, if we were writing a paper that was like, Brutus should not have killed Caesar, I would probably wrap this up using a little bit more explanation here. You know, if we were writing a paper that's saying that Brutus should kill Caesar, I would wrap this up in a different way. So if I'm saying that Brutus should not kill Caesar, I could say this further demonstrates that Brutus should not have murdered Caesar. I use the word murder because I want people to feel bad about it. Should not have murdered Caesar because his information was obviously from an untrustworthy source seeking his own benefit. Okay. So if I were gonna be writing that paper, that's probably how I'd end that right there. Okay. Now, if I were gonna flip this on its head, I might say something like, this illustrates how well Cassius knows people, and so he probably has a deep understanding of Caesar that Brutus might lack. And so Brutus should trust him, right? If I were writing the other side of this. That's how we could use this chart. The what, how, why chart is really helpful in data collection, essentially to use later while you guys are doing your reading. So you could look up stuff, have your quote, talk about how that quote works, which is not related to a claim, right? The why, you can do most of it, but you're going to end up adding more by the end depending on what essay you're writing, right? So that's how all of this ends up coming together. Hopefully this video is pretty helpful for you guys. There is another one on the YouTube channel, but I'll probably add more and more as we go along. As always, don't pirate my answers because you will get caught. But hopefully this is a good example for you. I tried to pick evidence that I didn't think all of you guys were going to use. So that's kind of how this goes down. If you guys have any questions, just ask me in class. I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks. All right, bye.